Molly Kate, and for my senior research, I decided to study the impacts of early childhood education and its importance. So children are the promise of tomorrow, and by educating them from a young age, we're truly setting them up for a successful future. How many of you in the audience believe that you could define early childhood education? A couple of you, okay, that's great. Let's see how you did. So simply put, this is a resource for children to begin learning educational and developmental skills in a classroom, and around this as being an effective way to allow children the same opportunity of education and elementary school readiness, no matter their economic status. Economic status often plays a large role in families' accessibility to send their children to preschool because many preschool programs are privately funded. And across the United States, there are very few programs that aren't extraordinarily expensive, so those families sitting in the financial minorities of society often face considerable setbacks from their peers and can't necessarily afford preschool programs. Because of this, I want to give you all an idea of their salary ranges and how they're truly affected by it. So those families in the lower classes of society earn around $48,000 or less a year. This group does suffer from an economic status gap and can't properly afford private education for their children, or sometimes preschool programs at all. Middle-class families earn between $48,000 and $148,000 a year. Well, this group doesn't necessarily suffer from the same financial setbacks and can often afford private programs for their children. They're not always readily available to them because preschool programs are very area dependent. And then those families in the high classes of society earn greater than $148,000 a year. And this group suffers little financial setbacks and most often chooses private programs to send their children to throughout their education. So since this is such a prevailing topic in our society and issue, you might ask what role the federal government actually plays. Well, starting in 1964, President Lyndon B. Johnson declared the war on poverty, and the Head Start program was born. This is something many of you actually may be familiar with. The Head Start program was designed to help break the cycle of poverty by providing children of low-income families with a comprehensive program to meet their needs. These needs range from social to cognitive to even nutritional. And then fast forward almost 50 years to 2013, when President Barack Obama called for Congress to expand access to high-quality preschools to every child in America. The Obama administration proposed the creation of this new program that would provide children of families who were sitting at or below the 200th percentile of the federal poverty level with a full-day, high-quality preschool program. Well, this was not meant to replace the old Head Start program, but rather build upon it to ensure the education of these young children. So what kind of setbacks upon the arrival to kindergarten might children face who did not have the ability to attend any kind of early learning programs? Well, they're often seen to struggle developmentally with academics, social, and cognitive developments, as well as some of their fine motor skills. Unfortunately, they're also seen to be behind not only in kindergarten, but throughout elementary school and sometimes throughout their education in speech and literacy. And I would say that everyone in this class can attest to the fact that speech and literacy are two things that you carry with you throughout your education and truly throughout your adulthood. So starting them off behind from your peers doesn't necessarily set you up for a successful future. Obama actually states in his State of the Union address that studies show in states that make it a priority to educate their youngest children, students grow up more likely to read and do math at grade level, graduate high school, hold a job, and create a more stable family of their own. We know this works, so let's do what works and make sure none of our children start the race of life already behind. Here's a graph of the average preschool program usages between the 1980s and the 2010s. In the 1980s, the Head Start program was truly in its adolescence, and over the last 4 decades since then, families have really taken advantage of this program. Since 1980, there has been a 61% increase of usage, and that's roughly 3.5 million students now attending preschool programs. From 2000 to 2010, which is when many of us were in preschool, there's only been a 4% increase. However, that's still millions of students in preschools, which is fantastic, and you can tell that the program is really doing its job. How many of you actually went to preschool? Most people. I did as well. So I want to show you another graph that really narrows down the 5 most common types of programs for early education and how their usages across the United States. This is from 2019. So you can see that local pre-K and special education are sitting at some of the lowest, around 3% for 3 and 4-year-olds, while state pre-K and private pre-K are sitting at some of the highest percentages, while 3-year-olds are at 34% in state pre-Ks and 4-year-olds 35% for private pre-Ks. Unfortunately, our problem really lies in the fact that a little under 50% of 4-year-olds are not enrolled in any preschool program at all. Something to keep in mind is that these programs are very dependent. You can even see a difference in different counties in Tennessee, such as Bedford and Williamson, and those families' accessibility to these programs. Any child that misses the education window or the preschool window is often faced considerable setbacks. This window consists of any learning that happens between the age of 2 and 4. And any child that misses this window by the age of 4 spends the rest of their educational career trying to catch up to their peers. During toddlerhood, a child's brain is most elastic. You can think of it like a sponge, soaking up every exposure that they have. And so if any child is not exposed to these learnings during 2 to 4 years old, they're not set up for success. Some schools have a couple children in a classroom who have missed this window and require a little extra attention from their teachers to catch up to their peers. Unfortunately, other schools, a majority of the classroom is filled with children who have missed this window and require that extra attention and are faced with considerable setbacks because of it. The recovery mechanism for low-income school systems that have a majority of their classrooms filled with children who have missed the preschool window are considered under a Title I federal program called Title I. The question you might be asking is the investment in preschools worth it? Well, without a doubt, the answer would be yes. The U.S. Department of Education actually details for every $1 spent on private education for your children, taxpayers save an average of $7 in future costs due to remedial education costs, increased labor productivity, as well as a reduction in crime. The CDC also states that early childhood education between the ages of 3 and 4 have profound effects on children's cognitive and social developments. So what role do we play in this issue, and what can we do? Well, as crazy as it might sound, we truly are the next generation of parents. And so it's our job to be educated on this issue and understand that it even exists. We also want to understand the importance of educating during toddlerhood and the science behind it, because a child's brain is truly growing so much between the time that they're born and the time that they're entering kindergarten. And so we want to offer them the greatest education that we can. Ultimately, we must send our children to preschool or offer them a learning experience during these toddlerhood years, because children receiving high-quality early learning from parents, family members, and caregivers are happier, healthier, and more likely to succeed later in life. So, will you break the cycle? Thank you all for listening.
Sowing the seeds for sustainability, improving food access through self-sufficient greenhouses. So the area that I'm working on is a suburb in Chicago, Dalton, Illinois. It was founded in 1892 by George Dalton, and as it grew, the meatpacking industry got very prominent in Chicago, and the railroad industry began to come into Dalton around 1895, and that began to grow the local economy. And that led to more urban development, which we can see a lot around 1960, with the construction of the Calumet Expressway in 1965, which made the village of Dalton a lot more accessible for people coming in and out of the city. And that really facilitated the ethnic shift, which occurred in the early 2000s, where Dalton went from a population of almost 99% Caucasian to only 15%, due to a large influx of African Americans and a large exodus of Caucasian residents. And just for some reference, the population of Dalton is around 22,700 people, and the density is around 5,000 people per mile, whereas Bell Buckle is only about 930 people per square mile. So some facts and figures. According to Phil Cadner, an economist for the Chicago Sun-Times, the property tax rate in Dalton is 24.28%, compared to the neighboring suburb of Lincolnwood, which is only 9%. For example, the owner of a $100,000 home would pay $5,000 in Dalton, whereas in Lincolnwood, they would only pay around $2,000. Additionally, according to Casey Toner, who wrote the history of brief history of Dalton. Following the 2009 recession, the poverty rate in Dalton climbed to nearly 13.6% and now stands at nearly double the state average. So that you can be reflected in the 15.8% unemployment rate, which you can compare to the 8% statewide and 6% national. And in addition, the 20.3% of residents living below the poverty line. And that's, like I said, nearly double the state average. So, food accessibility. This is what it is and why it matters. And this is the problem I seek to remedy with my project, improving food accessibility in the village of Dalton. Okay, so the USDA defines food accessibility as the extent to which people and places have access to both affordable and healthy foods. So in Dalton, it's considered a food desert, which the USDA defines as any area with limited access to affordable and healthy food. And in Dalton, there's a lot of these corner stores, which for reference is about half of the size of the ADQ. So it's very small, doesn't have a lot of options. And with that definition, limited access just means that more than 30% of the population live more than a mile away from the grocery store. And in Dalton, more than 50% of the population, like the most dense population center in Dalton, lives more than 3 miles from the nearest substantial grocery store, which is Food Co. And there are several of these corner stores, but like I said previously, they're like half the size of the ADQ, so they don't provide that many options. This creates kind of a vicious cycle. Like I said earlier, they have a really high unemployment rate, which causes a lack of income tax, so businesses don't want to invest, and there's very low cash flow in the local economy, and that creates no jobs. So the cycle keeps feeding into itself. So over the summer, I did an internship in the village of Dalton. In the picture on the far left is the mayor, Mayor Rogers. In the middle, Elizabeth Scott, who's the village administrator, and then me, obviously. And I did an internship under the mayor doing data entry, just assisting in administrative tasks. And on the weekend, I volunteered at a food drive that the mayor was hosting weekly for those citizens of Dalton. And I talked with a few families there, and around 70% said that this food drive was a crucial source of food for their family, or they couldn't find any healthier options elsewhere, which is really important to keep in mind. Another issue that I noticed is that they were severely understaffed. There are only 4 members on the Public Works Department, and for a city with like 22,000 people, only having 4 people to deal with like lawn care, any maintenance issues is very problematic. And they also had a very big problem with administration and administrative management. So my solution was to partner with Urban Habitat Chicago, which is this great nonprofit that builds greenhouses in areas like this. And according to their website, their mission is to demonstrate the viability of sustainable concepts and practices in urban environments through research, education, and hands-on projects. And in my experience, they do just that. This is actually a project I worked on at Northside College Prep in Chicago. And basically, we just installed permeable concrete walkways in the community garden, which allows for rain runoff, and that allows for the neighboring plants and gardens and like around the walkway to get water without damaging the sidewalk. So there are several types of greenhouses. On the top right, you can see the square base with the triangular roof. This design is very sturdy, almost like a miniature house. And then on the bottom, there's the arched roof hoop or gable shape, which allows for maximum retention of humidity and water and snow runoff, which is really important in Chicago because it snows a lot in the winter. And this is all designs from Lawnstarter, which is a very popular online gardening forum. So this is why greenhouses work, and this is why my project that I'm planning is going to create a lasting solution to combat food accessibility in Dalton. So according to Horta Daily, a greenhouse forum, greenhouses are fairly easy to maintain, requiring only regular cleaning and repair of things like heaters, fans, and other appliances. And in general, the greenhouse outlasts its components. Additionally, greenhouse plastic, like the plastic you see on the outside there, tends to last anywhere from 3 to 5 years, making them fairly long-lasting. Additionally, greenhouses are very affordable. The Craftsman National Building Cost Estimator estimates around $25 per square foot. While cheaper PVC designs, which you can see there, on the bottom, can cost as little as $50 for the entire project. And lastly, control. According to Shelter Logic, a well-known forum for outdoor construction, greenhouses offer a more controlled climate for growing. Swing temperatures, whether at the beginning or end of the planting season, will put the plants at risk because obviously they're in an enclosed environment. And this is very important for Chicago's weather, which is very unpredictable. especially in the winter months where it can get cold. And so this will allow the people in Dalton and the community to grow food throughout the year. And so it won't just be on and off, so they'll have like constant access to food the entire time. And so the smallest greenhouses can feed 1 to 2 people, while the largest can feed anywhere from 10 to 15, and it all depends on space efficiency. And I believe that if Urban Habitat Chicago, the nonprofit I mentioned earlier, could partner with Dalton and build several greenhouses, it will provide the community with the skills and ability to not only provide for themselves and educate each other, but also with a convenient and affordable source of healthy food. Greenhouses serve as a bifold solution to not just improving food access and combating the food insecurity in Dalton, but also enabling the residents to take control of their community. Thank you.
Questions for Winthrop?
Albert?
We built some of these around here, or at least use the ones at the top of the EW Science building.
Yes, that's something that I could very easily do. I personally have a lot of experience with building greenhouses. Like I worked on that project. I worked with Urban Habitat Chicago for many years, and it's
It's better or worse if there's less people?
I don't know. Huh?
Is it better or worse if there's less people?
Worse.
Alex?
Hi, my name is Abby Gallagher, and this is my 7th year at Webb. For my senior presentation, I began to think about what is important to me and landed on injuries. And from there, I researched the dangers of sitting and how it impacts our mobility and our muscles. This is a major part of the thesis I developed as I wrapped up my research and began to analyze all my new information. It gives the basis of my research and provided me a solid issue to begin problem solving for. The 3 main problems that arise from sitting and sedentary tendencies is hip weakness, ankle weakness, and back weakness. All of these combined make prime conditions for injuries to occur and can create trouble for your knees, making your ACL, along with other parts of your knee, easier to injure. As you can see in the image, there's 4 major points in your backside that develop afflictions the longer you sit, and each one has an essential role to keeping your body functional and healthy, like the neck getting tense and tight, trapezius muscles are strained, the discs in your back begin to bulge, and your hips weaken. And if your hips are weakened, your backs are weakened, and vice versa. Many have deemed the sedentary lifestyle the sitting disease, as it can sicken you and is really hard to get rid of. Over 100 million Americans are living with chronic pain, and 7.6 million Americans put back pain as their main reason for disability claims. Besides the negative effects sitting has on your muscles and mobility, it can affect your health as well. Sitting can increase the risk of foggy brain, diabetes, colon cancer, and heart disease, among other things. The most frightening statistic I saw is that people that sat for 6 or more hours and had low activity levels had a 71% mortality rate. The study went as far as to say that people that still sat that long and exercised more still had a 50% higher mortality rate. This means that overdoing physical activity will not fully counteract the amount of hours you spend sitting down. One of the main groups affected by this is athletes, specifically student athletes. When sitting starts to impact their performance, their speed and movement is reduced by their lack of muscle strength and overall bodily mobility. This puts them at major risk for injury, which further depletes their athletic performance and chances of playing at a higher level. Student athletes struggle day to day without the aspect of stretching and mobility added into their day, as it is tough staying on top of everyday tasks. They are required to get through school at a desk all day, do their homework, work for hours on their respective sports, along with all their daily tasks at home. They have very little time built into their day to worry about stretching and mobility. With proper care for their bodies and less time spent sitting in a chair, athletes would just be better athletes. They would spend less time worried about injury and pains and more time training and becoming better at their sports. They would be efficient and capable of elevating their game, which could potentially lead to a higher level of college play with more efficient athletes exiting high schools. Another large group affected by the sitting epidemic is students. They spend all day at a desk between classes, meals, studying, and bus rides. Outside of the necessary sitting that they do for classes, additional hours spent sitting likely take their 5 to 6 hours spent in classes into 8 or more hours a day. We teach students critical thinking skills and provide them with the necessary mental skills to succeed in life, but we neglect their physical health. They think time is well spent at home after studying for 5 or more hours. And while that may help them in school, it's severely limiting their movement and setting them up for long-term pain. It is developing an innate laziness in many young people as they feel completely satisfied with a full day spent at a desk despite their lack of physical activity. This can be amplified in students that are not athletes. Many students do not wish to participate in sports and choose different routes with school activities. This unfortunately limits their ability to get physical activity into their day even further. These students do not get a 2-hour practice for their daily movement and muscle strengthening. Likely many of them go to school and go home and then study and repeat this process. But with proper channels to promote mobility and stretching, these students could prevent future aches and pains and live longer, healthier lives. They just need a push in the right direction to mitigate unnecessary risks to their health. Workers are another prime target affected by sedentary lifestyles. Many employees work 9-to-5 jobs or even 12-hour shifts. A very large portion of workers have desk jobs and are required to be sitting at a desk for hours at a time. This is a major factor in the previous statistic I used that said 7.6 million Americans put back pain on disability claims. Their jobs are giving them chronic pains and preventing them from further work hours, and this is a vicious cycle that many people cannot escape. At a desk job, you are hunched over at a desk and severely impacting the functions of your spine and the way you're supposed to hold up your body. Many workers also have limited time and end up not having the energy or concern to do mobility by the time they get home. Like students, workers could dissolve current aches and pains by just implementing a new body-friendly lifestyle and using standing desks. This could help limit doctor's visits as well, because it would lower your risk for certain diseases and you would be staying healthier for longer, negating the need for doctor's visits. The best way to solve these chronic issues within these 3 main groups is just implementing daily stretch breaks. There are enough wasted minutes throughout the day that could be filtered together into 5 to 10-minute breaks that could be a designated stretch break. Another break that could be enforced is just a break where you can get to stand for 5 to 10 minutes. Another important aspect is simply awareness. Many people are unaware of how bad sitting down truly is for you. Just spreading this information around, especially for many individuals that would take their health into their own hands. As many classrooms are discussion-based, there is no reason for sitting. Teachers could enforce a standing policy when discussions begin and even have students move about the room. Standing desks could be purchased for office spaces and people that have desk jobs, and it could help lower the amount of hours spent hunched over a computer in businesses. The biggest problem these solutions face are board members. School boards, business boards, and CEOs would have to be convinced this is a real problem in order to start implementing helpful breaks, guided stretches, and buying standing desks. People would need to be aware of the dangers of sitting, and there would likely have to be significant organization in order to make these breaks productive and not more wasted minutes. Money is only an issue in terms of purchasing standing desks, as companies and schools would have to feel like standing desks are worth the investment. Within Webb, I think breaks could be easily implemented. A club organization could even facilitate stretches and give a required form to fill out. Stretches could easily be incentivized and turned into a competition as well. One of the nice things about Webb is that we spend so much time walking around campus, so it's not a huge problem here, but we could still work on ourselves and strive to be better active individuals. We just need to find the time in the day to take all these minutes and put them to use. These are my works cited.
And it has been done a lot. In 2006, it was around 20%, so it has been done a lot, but we would love to get that even lower. So, Hispanic population in Tennessee. So like I said, there has been a rapid increase of Hispanic population in America as a whole in the past 25 years. But in Tennessee, in 2019, there was around 7 million total residents, with almost 400,000 identifying as Hispanic or Latino, and almost 150,000 of them are undocumented. So due to this rapid growth, it can impact communities both positively and negatively, and for those negative impacts, we need to make sure that we provide educational support for the students. And then students can become lost due to overpopulation. So especially if you aren't familiar with the language, it's really hard to take that risk in classrooms and raise your hand and ask a question if you're scared that you're gonna, not be able to communicate correctly. So like I said, it's important that we find ways to help support these children. So through my research, I found a lot of organizations and scholarships to help support Hispanic students, which there were literally like so many. It was really hard to pick the two that I picked. But the first one is DACA, and the second one is Connection on Americas. So DACA stands for Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, and their mission is to protect any eligible student who came to the United States as an infant from deportation if they aren't documented yet. And if this was done away with, ICE would be able to deport around 800,000 young adult immigrants, which that's a lot of people. And they would also lose access to any health care and work visas, as well as any chance for further education such as college in America. And then Connection on Americas is actually based and was founded out of Nashville, so it covers any Middle Tennessee Hispanic or Latino family here. And I really like this organization because they focus on things other than education, so like buying a house, starting a business, and they also provide education for whole families. So they can focus on students, but as well as a whole family. It doesn't really have an age limit, so they can benefit anyone. So I kind of touched on the first two, but just kind of reiterate my points. Hispanics do have the second highest percent of dropout rates. It has went down, but we'd love to get that even lower. And then the resources. So due to many schools becoming overpopulated, students can lack essential resources such as textbooks and manipulatives, making it extremely difficult to excel in a class if you don't have the correct material. And then the language barrier, that's probably the biggest issue. So it's essential that we have ESL classes provided for these students, but there is a shortage of teachers, so this probably would be more of like a long-term thing. And then home life. So home life is different for everyone. And in my research, I found that many Hispanic students do not live in an English-speaking home. So either one to none of the parents speak English. So that can be really difficult for homework purposes or communicating with a teacher. And as well as access to internet. We know, especially in this day and age, that everything is on Zoom now. So it's really difficult to do if you don't have a computer or if you have unstable internet connection. So it's important that we find ways to help besides the internet to help these students. And then parent involvement, so a lot of parents are involved in their students' lives, but for those who aren't, we need to find ways to support them. So how can we fix this? So I proposed an idea to create a scholarship to DACA and other organizations similar. So for all of the undocumented students, I would create a fundraiser that would be held 1 to 2 times per year, and I would give it to 3 to 4 students, and it would carry over every 2 years. So DACA costs $495 every 2 years, so that way they could be insured a K-12 education without fear of deportation, and hopefully become documented in that K-12 time. And then I would also plan to provide free extra help programs either at school, online, at home, group or individual tutoring programs for these students. And then I would push to have ESL classes held every day or for a longer time. I don't think I could be able to do both since there is a shortage of teachers, and maybe create an incentive for teachers, but I didn't get that far. And then just to go deeper into my points that I made, so you may be thinking, how would we pay for this if it's free? So it would be all volunteer work. So any volunteers or teachers that wanted to volunteer their time after school, they would have to pass a test and have some sort of Spanish class background to be able to be eligible. But and it can be counted as in-service hours. I guess it would depend on the county how they feel about that. Or a gift basket. So I would create a fundraiser to fund gift baskets every year or quarterly to send to the teachers for appreciating them. And then, like I said, it would be either at school, online, or at home, and it can be group or individual depending on how the student likes to learn. And then, like I said, I would push for ESL classes to be offered every day, but that may be more of a long-term thing since there is a shortage of teachers right now. So just to wrap up and kind of reiterate my points, Hispanic immigrants come to the United States every year for numerous reasons, one of them being education. So this can lead to overpopulation in schools and things such as language barrier and scarce resources. So that can allow students to fall behind. So with this, we need to find ways such as free extra help programs, ESL classes, and scholarships for DACA and other organizations. That way students can flourish. Okay, and then lastly, I'd like to end with a quote from John F. Kennedy. He says, "All of us do not have an equal talent, but all of us should have an equal opportunity to develop our talent." And I really like this quote because I feel the same way, and I feel that regardless of your background, you should have an equal opportunity for success and an equal opportunity for education, because with education, you can do anything. Thank you so much for listening. Here is my work.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Liam Fowler. This is my 7th year at Webb, and today I'll be sharing my goal to turn Gold's Gym into a green gym. So before beginning my project, Gold's Gym had many problems concerning their carbon footprint. They were lacking in portion controlled dispensers, which tear out adequate pieces of paper towels. They also lacked knowledge on adequate portions, since I would commonly see members grab pieces of paper that were too large for the smallest pieces of equipment. And most importantly, they lacked non-recyclable white tree paper. All white tree paper rolls were directly thrown into trash, and they were never considered to be recycled. Gold's Gym needed reformation, and thankfully they had a concerned member. Before I began to actually reform Gold's Gym South, the cleanliness of the gym was not as amazing as it could have been. Their trash cans were constantly overflowing with plastic bottles and energy drink cans, and it left no one available, they were also understaffed, which left no one available to be able to change out these trash cans. Secondly, their paper towel dispensers were being restocked almost every day, and boxes of paper towels were being shipped in every 2 weeks. They were spending way too much money on buying paper towels, and they needed members they had members that were using them without control. I So for the approach, I had to execute more than one plan due to a lack of concern over Gold's Gym South's carbon footprint. Firstly, I wanted to meet with the Gold's Gym owner and staff, but I was told they were too busy or they could never get into Gold's Gym at the same time because the owner lived about an hour away. And secondly, I wanted to just speak to the manager over the phone, but I was told they were at the gym at the moment or they were too busy to have like a Zoom call. And lastly, I was ready to quit and just take matters into my own hands, but one day I was mindlessly scrolling through Instagram and I saw that a porter position opened up at Gold's Gym South and I decided to apply and I got the job. So I had to come in with efficient knowledge on 3 alternatives, and across my research, I saw that the most sustainable alternative would be personalized cloth towels, which would also advertise Gold's Gym. This was the best bet they could use for another solution, but this one was going to be a little bit pricey for them. So I researched Kenoff paper since it's 100% recyclable and fast-growing plant. And the third alternative would be portion set dispensers. These weren't the best thing that they could use, but it would still lessen waste by approximately 21%. So this graph compares the sustainability, trees consumed, and water consumption of tree paper, Kenoff paper, and cloth towels. As you can see, Kenoff paper is the most sustainable out of the other 2, but it still does use water and some trees to make the mills. Although Kenoff paper would be a great contribution to lessening Gold's Gym, it would not lessen their carbon footprint as much as cloth towels would. So cloth towels are the second most sustainable. However, they still do use a lot more direct water waste and in comparison to tree paper and Kenoff paper. So for the next phase of my project, I decided to take matters into my own hands and use the power that I had as a porter. Since I am the only porter at Gold's Gym South, I was fortunate enough to be able to control all guidelines and regulations for the cleanliness of the gym. I instilled 3 ground rules for all future porters and anyone who fills in for my spot. Firstly, no paper towels were allowed to be used on the shift. Polishing and sanitizing equipment should be done with only cloth towels provided for the porter. We already had plenty of towels, so this was an easy fix for all porters. Secondly, dispensers should only be changed once the paper towel roll is completely used. Previously, porters were changing out the dispensers every day, and they would change them out before they were even completely used, which wasted good paper towels that they could have used to wipe down equipment. Thirdly, porters should offer to sanitize equipment for members at the gym while they're doing their rounds, because this will eliminate all paper towel use at the gym while members are using their equipment. The difference it makes. So after only 3 weeks of following 3 simple rules, I saw major changes throughout the gym. Throughout the gym, I even had less work to do because I wasn't having to change out dispensers or take out the trash as often because we were using less paper towels. Trash cans were almost never overflowing anymore. It took much more time to fill up since members weren't using as many paper towels, and some trash cans were even taking over 24 hours to fill up, and previously they were taking only 7 hours. Dispensers were almost never being replaced either, since paper towels were not being used as often. Since I had instilled the 3 rules, I've only restocked each dispenser once. Overall, Gold's Gym has saved more money because less money was being spent on restocking paper towel rolls, and only 1 order has been made for paper towels since these rules have been instilled. Thank you for listening. Here's my works cited.
Having fun, and at the end of the party, they got into the car with an intoxicated driver. On the way home, they turned onto a street into oncoming traffic. People try to warn them by honking their horn and flashing their lights, but due to the driver being intoxicated, he ignores them. Eventually, red and blue lights fill the sky as a policeman pulls them over and eventually gets them home. A lot of us have a story similar to this, but a lot of times the ending isn't so nice. Teenage drunk driving is a major problem in America today. So why is it such a huge problem? A majority of high school students will have had alcohol before graduating high school. In fact, within the last 30 days, 22% of 8th graders, 39% of 10th graders, and 50% of high school seniors have had alcohol. While a lot of them have only had a small amount, the Journal of School Health has found that 30% of high schoolers have reported binge drinking, which is 5 or more drinks within the past 30 days. 50% of high school seniors. Why is that percentage so high? The main reason for alcohol consumption is stress, anxiety, and depression. Seniors can feel these emotions a lot their senior year, whether from stress for college, anxieties about their futures, and just a mixture of all three throughout the senior year. While these emotions can lead to drinking, the Journal of Studies on Alcohol and Drugs claims that a family dynamic can help decide and determine the amount of alcohol use in teens. A family that keeps alcohol easily accessible to children and drinks in their presence a lot, the child can become desensitized to the dangers of alcohol and can find it easily accessible. While a family that keeps alcohol out of the reach of children and only drink occasionally and in moderation, the child can become sensitized to the dangers of alcohol and will not be able to find it easily. While there are many exceptions to this scenario, a majority of times this is the case. Another way in which family can determine alcohol use in teens is the relationship between parent and child. A child that has a good relationship with their parents is less likely to drink, while a child that has a bad relationship with their parents is more likely to. While family can determine a child's attitude towards alcohol, major events such as COVID-19 can increase the amount consumed. During COVID-19, there was a surge of alcohol consumption and the dangers that stem from it. In March of 2020, the United States went into lockdown. Schools shut down, and the rules were put in place that we must stay 6 feet apart and wear a mask at all times. Due to this, students were not getting the normal human interaction that they would normally get at school. That caused them to become lonely and depressed. On top of that, there are a lot of anxieties that stem from all the unknowns. There's the unknown of when the vaccine would come out, the unknown of when we'd be able to see friends and family again, the unknown of when the lockdown would end, and the unknown of when school would start again. A lot of times teenagers disregarded the rules and still had parties and organizations. At these parties and organizations, alcohol was usually accessible. Due to school being out and the depression and anxieties from COVID-19, there was nothing stopping students from using alcohol as a way to release these anxieties and depressions. So what can we do to help solve this problem? Here are some solutions. First is lessening availability. One way to lessen availability is to raise the drinking age. By raising the drinking age, it would make it less available to high school students. 2 studies done by Dr. Frank J. Chaluka and Henry Welschler, a lecturer from Harvard, have proven that by raising the drinking age, it will significantly decrease the amount of youth motor vehicle accidents. Another way is to strengthen enforcement on already existing policies, such as the zero tolerance laws and creating more severe consequences for drunk driving. While all of these options will significantly decrease teenage drunk driving, they take a long time to put in place, and a lot of parents and students don't have the time. Another solution is a parent pact. A parent pact is a contract between parent and child, claiming that if the child gets into a situation where they have been drinking or their driver has been drinking and they need a safe ride home, they can contact their parents, and they will get them home safely. A lot of times, the contract claims that the parent will not berate or punish the child until the next day, sometimes even not at all. However, a child is not likely to use this option due to the fear of how the parent will react. The fear of losing their phone, car, or any other privileges, and sometimes just the disappointment from their parents can cause a child to not contact their parents when needed, making the contract obsolete. Another pact similar to the parent pact is a student pact between two students. In this pact, if one student was in a situation, they could contact another student to come and pick them up. However, teenagers are not very reliable, so the chance of your friend being able to come and pick you up is slim. The best solution is to increase awareness. Programs such as SAD, Students Against Destructive Decisions, are great for increasing awarenesses in schools. Luckily, Webb already has a program like this in place called Feet to Feet, which was started by Mike Quinn. Feet to Feet has two main goals. The first is to mentor new students, and the second is to aid students in living an anti-drug, anti-alcohol life. While Feet to Feet does a great job, there are a couple of places where we can improve. First is by putting up posters and making announcements in chapel. By putting up posters and making announcements in chapel, we can remind people of the Feet to Feet Club and its goals. The second is to create a newsletter or website. By creating a newsletter or website, we can make it easier for students to contact us with questions, and also we can give it to other schools who are wanting to create a program similar to Feet to Feet. While it's important to increase awareness amongst students, it's also important to increase awareness amongst parents. Mothers Against Drunk Driving is a great program for parents to get involved in. In fact, 94% of Americans are familiar with MAD and its purpose. Its purpose is to spread information about drunk driving and to lessen the amount of drunk driving accidents. All parents need to do to get involved is to find a chapter near them and jump right in. We all need to work together to stop this dangerous behavior. As the founder of this school once said, "Do not be a spectator, take a hand in the game." Thank you.
Issue, solution, and our community. Okay, so the first is the importance of STEM. So what is STEM? STEM means science, engineering, technology, and mathematics. So STEM and economy. So the following list are the 10 most profitable companies in the United States, and all the companies that are in red color are STEM related. We can see Apple, Microsoft, Alphabet, which is a mother company of Google, Intel, and Verizon Communications. So, and all those companies earn their profits by advanced technology. So if US loses its STEM leadership, the economy is going to be deeply damaged. And STEM and national security. So what is modern warfare based on? It's based on advanced technology as stated by Pentagon. More specifically, Pentagon points out 5 areas, which is cyber, artificial intelligence, quantum, hypersonic weapons, and 3D printing. So if there's another country gets ahead of US in STEM, US military is also going to be threatened. So what is the current issue of STEM? So first, I'm going to introduce an indicator of STEM capacity, which is called Nature Index. So Nature Index is found by Nature Journal. I don't know if you guys know this. It is one of the most selective journal in the world. And so what this index do is track the accretion of high quality scientific articles and give an index. So a country's research output is measured by the sum of the index of the paper from that country. And the bigger the number is, the better the country is. So what is United States? So as you guys may know, United States are still the largest research output country in the world, and followed by China in the second one. But the current issue is that from the graph, we can see the blue color is US. So US basically stayed the same in the past 5 years, while China has made a significant change, increasing in the research output in the past 5 years. So the second graph is called the change in adjusted share, which means how many progress a country made in research output in each year. We can see the zero axis is right here, and the number of China are all positive, which means China are increasing its research output by year, but US are decreasing the research output by each year. So if this tendency follows, China going to outcompete US in research output by before 2025. In fact, the reason, I'm sorry, the issue of United States STEM is not just in advanced research, but also in the teenager education. So there is a test called PISA, which means Programming for International Student Assessment. It measures the reading comprehension of math, science, fluency of 15 years old among 71 countries. And the following data are showing from 2008. So we can see from mathematics and science, US has a huge difference with China. US ranked 38 over 78 in mathematics, and 19 over 78 in science, while China ranked first in both of these tests. And the third problem with US STEM is the society issue, which is the extremely disproportion of foreign-born STEM workers in the US. So as we see, the following data are from the Immigration Council in 2005. So as we see from the graph, managers, engineering, mathematicians, scientists, and health workers, US all have around 20% of them are born in a foreign country. Well, the ideal percentage should be less than 5%. And right now you may ask me, so why US cannot just accept immigration like from a foreign country? Because that is how United States was founded in the first place. The reason why US cannot accept foreign scientists is because of two reasons. First, America does not want foreign scientists to come, because specifically in the recent years, there is a spreading of a xenophobic sentiment. We can see from the social media that people keep saying immigration take their job, steal their technology. And because of that, the new policy of H-1B visa also will make working in US become much harder. And also, foreign scientists are now willing to come to United States because their home country become much better and better. Six, they say mass computation can develop critical thinking and make students understand scientific concept easily, and teach them advanced mathematics like number theory, discrete mathematics, and advanced geometry, which can make students become more skillful in STEM. And besides mass computation, is there any other way that can serve the same purpose? Yes, it's called scientific experiment. But the reason why I choose mass computation over scientific experiment is because scientific experiment will cost much more dollar. So the following two graphs are showing the cost of mass computation and science experiment in a scale of 10 students. So we can see it's much expensive. Okay, and why I choose high school math computation? Because according to the research from Hutchison, the guy we mentioned earlier, the majority of the students choose besides their major in college in high school, as shown by the graph, high school. And now we are going to talk about our communities. So math computation in the White High School. So we currently have 4 different math computation. The elementary level are Math League Prize, which is we have 6 times a year. Each time is 30 minutes. Everyone above eligible 1 are welcome to join. The second one is TMTA, which is a medium level. It took place in April, 90 minutes long, and selected students from each class are welcome to join. And the third one is advanced level, which is AMC. We have it on February. It's a 75 minutes long test, and top students of the school are encouraged to join. And the last one is extremely advanced level. It's called American Conventional Mathematics Examination, which is a 3-hour long test. We only have 1 student every 5 years in the web school are qualified for this math competition. And my contribution to the web community. So I built a math club since 10th grade to introduce students about advanced mathematics. I regularly making chapel announcement about math competition, and I encourage many individuals to participate in the math competition. And I want to thank you all for listening to my presentation. And this is my work cited for all the research and work cited for all the images.
Should there be an age limit for owning a gun? In my opinion, teenagers shouldn't be able to buy guns. This leads into violence. A news reporter says, unfortunately, gun control laws don't work, and even if they did, they will never be enforced. But in my opinion, gun laws only work if we make them work. We have to get them off the street. Why do people need guns? For protection or to keep them safe? More gun control laws will reduce gun deaths everywhere. We could prevent deaths and a lot of injuries around the world. Why aren't they normalized yet? We haven't taken gun control seriously now, so why would we haven't taken gun control laws seriously earlier, so why are we taking now? Background checks should be in every gun shops. Background checks help because guns shouldn't be sold to just anyone. Researchers require background checks on all gun sales, and it has 35% fewer gun deaths per capita in 2009-2012. If we do background checks, we can reduce gun crimes. There are different types of gun violences, and here's my top 4. Number 4 is firearm suicide. Suicide is taking your own life, and it's a tragic reaction to a stressful situation that can be prevented. I feel that suicide is a very tragic thing because my friend lost her cousin to suicide because he was bullied for being gay, and he was only 15. Another question I have is, why is a 15-year-old so accessible to a gun? Number 3 is domestic violence homicide. Domestic violence is another tragic one because one person could really take your life because of jealousy, substance abuse, drug and alcohol, possession of firearm, and depression and suicidal thoughts. Number 2, accidental shooting and community violence. Accidental shootings happen a lot in low-income neighborhoods and low-poverty places. Community violence is exposure to intentional acts of impersonal violence committed in areas in the public by individuals that are not related to the victim. Although people can anticipate some of the traumatic events, community violence can happen suddenly without a warning. Community violence is very scary, especially in a community with a lot of kids growing up. This can traumatize them and scar them for life. And number 1 is mass shootings. Mass shooting is an incident involving multiple victims in gun violence. There's no official definition for mass shooting, but here's some examples. Incident happened in Las Vegas, October 1st, 2017. 59 dead and more than 8,500 wounded. And also most famous one is Sandy Hook, an elementary school. December 14, 2012, 26 dead and 2 wounded. Did you know over 500 individuals die every day from gun violence? 44% of all murders universally included weapons brutality. An estimate of 2,000 people are injured by gunshots every day, and 2 million people are living with firearm injuries around the whole globe. My main issue is why is guns so accessible? Unlike cars, you don't need a license, but every state in the USA requires a permit to operate a motor vehicle. But most don't require a permit to purchase your own firearm. Just only 14 states require a permit to own their own gun. According to gun law centers to prevent gun violence, and many of those laws don't cover rifles or shotguns. Number 2, background checks are not incomplete. Gun dealers in the USA who are licensed by the federal government are required to run by the FBI background checks before selling a weapon to somebody. These background checks are meant to catch people banned from purchasing a gun under the federal laws, and this includes anyone convicted of a crime punishable for more than 1 year in prison, fugitive, anyone found dangerous or incomplete due to mental illness, anyone dishonorably discharged from the military, any subject to certain kinds of restraining order, and anyone convicted of domestic violence. And number 3, guns are easily available on the internet. The internet has opened up many ways to purchase guns. Private sellers usually can ship their own state without doing a background check. To ship to another state, this is called interstate sales. They have license and dealership to intermarry. Ways to make guns hard to access. My first theory is guns should be like buying cars, like I said before. If we make guns as hard as buying cars, we won't really have as many guns. And number two, make more gun laws and rules. If we have more rules, most likely people are going to enforce them. If they're not, they're going to wind up in jail. My solution was gun violence. This will impact the country and the whole world if we had stricter handgun laws. And license is necessary to save lives. The goal of gun control is to prevent someone who wants to harm themselves or others and having easy access to guns. Stop violence everywhere. I really believe this can work. The goal of gun control is to prevent someone who wants to harm themselves or having easy access to everyone that has easy access to a gun. This law allows people to own firearms in case of self.
Establishments. So this is a graph I made, but basically it's showing the survival rate of bees over the years. The 10 years is a general mark. So as you can see, we start at year 1, you have all of your bees. And then in the fall they kind of die off, less food and whatnot, you don't need them all. And in the spring they're already low, and then they grow back. But then as you can see, in year 10, you're already starting lower. So that means when they grow up in the fall and then die off again, you already have fewer bees that are surviving. And these bees are pollinating 90% of all of our food, which is a lot of it, and without them, our prices would go up, and we would have less food available. Alright, so this is a cartoon that you can read through about the effects of neonicotinoids. So they are a neurotoxin that is very addictive. It is widespread and cheap to apply because it is so big. 80% of farmers use it so they can make it super cheap. And also, get that off. Anyway, so, and because it's a neurotoxin, it causes their brain to basically shut down, but they don't die immediately, so it causes colony collapse disorder basically, which is then bees harming the colony before they die, which then causes the colony to die, which then all the bees die. And then also, because the neonicotinoids sounds like nicotine, which is the chemical in cigarettes, which is very harmful to humans, but we are over 100,000 times larger than bees. So whatever impacts we get, the bees get it 100,000 times worse, which is just not good. And also because it's addictive and it kills the bees literally are addicted to a chemical that is killing them and they can't stop. So the neonicotinoids, there are 8 types of them, and they're all 8 big words that I can't say. So it's a neurotoxin, and the effects on bees are not good. They'll kill them slowly or quickly, depending on the lethal doses that the farmer applies and how often. And then Roundup, there is a version of it, and it is created by Monsanto, which is a big agricultural business. They produce seeds, pesticides, and everything, but it's all genetically modified. So if you have their seeds, you have to buy them every year because they keep changing them, and it's technically their property. And then also they create pesticides, which are also some neonicotinoids that are also tailored just for those plants. And so it's basically a monopoly on this type of chemical. So colony collapse disorder. When a bee is starting to die, they get inputs from other bees and the environment around them. Then they put an output, moving, harvesting, feeding babies or whatever. So what happens is they end up harvesting something wrong, feeding the babies the wrong thing or whatever, killing the babies, etc., which is just not good. And then the bees die. And if too many of the bees die, then the colony can't support itself regardless. And you can see in the image here, you can do it through water. You can seed coat them, which means you coat the seeds and then you plant them and they grow up and it has an inherent, like, resistance basically. Alright, so this is an issue. So as you can see here in this graph at the bottom, all the categories put together, there's about 150 million bees in the world, which sounds like a lot, but it's really not when you realize that they save $1,618 million per year. So that's a ton of money, and if without these bees, one, we wouldn't be able to produce all the food that we need, and then also, like, the prices would go so far up, most people probably couldn't afford food. So, and then also bees create honey, which tastes pretty good. And then the flowers and trees. So like the trees collect carbon dioxide, produce oxygen, all the stuff that we need to survive. The bees also pollinate them so they can continue to survive. So what can we do? Organic farming sounds like a great option, and most people don't realize this though, that it does not mean you're pesticide free or fertilizer free. It just means you use a more selective group of pesticides that are usually more organic, but they also last less time out in the field, so you have to use them more often, so that's why it costs more. You can go pesticide free, which again costs more because anything you plant is very vulnerable to anything outside, and then you lose more of your yield, and so it costs more to produce. And then awareness. If you look at your food and you can see what's in it, because anything that a farmer puts on the plant, it's absorbed into the plant tissue, and when it's processed, it does not leave. So whatever that neonicotinoid they put on it, it stays there, and then you're actually eating it, which is also not a good thing. So just look at the labels and see what they're putting into their food, and also an extra $3 or whatever for a vegetable probably won't put you in the poorhouse. So solutions, GMOs, because with the inherent ability to protect themselves, means farmers need to put less into it and you get more out of it and quicker. So you need to put, like, if you put fewer chemicals on it, you're safer, it costs the farmers less, so therefore it saves you money also. And as you can see, 93% of corn is already genetically modified in the US. And most people don't seem to realize that it's already way out there and it's there, and so just like you kind of accept it, but I can't make the decision for you. You have to like agree with what the principle is. So also some other solutions for this is of course organic farming, but as you can see here in the sign, watch the wind speed and direction. If a farmer next to you has Monsanto seeds, so they're pollen basically, and they cross-pollinate with your field, it becomes Monsanto's property and you lose your crop and all of your money basically. So you need, like, this is a good solution, but until like agriculture becomes not privatized, it's not really viable. Pesticide free, again, just costs too much because you lose too much of your yield. Seed coating, again, it absorbs into the plant tissue and then you eat it directly, which is not healthy for us. And then double-strand RNA, which is a vaccine developed by Yale, which you put it on the plants by spraying like you normally would, and then it's biodegradable, so it leaves the plants after a certain amount of time. But however, it biodegrades within 10 to 20 days, so a farmer would have to replant or recoat every 2 weeks basically, which is just super expensive in this. So it's a good solution. It protects us and the bees, but it's just too expensive to be viable right now. Alright, so I can't make the decision for you to say GMOs are the perfect way to go. You just have to make your own decision, like, I want to be more active or agriculturally minded when I buy my produce in the store, and just think about what you're buying and what's actually going into it behind the scenes. Do you know why it's not?
And Snapchat or Facebook. Some other ways people will get their news are magazines, websites, newspapers, or like news apps. So for my project, I'm going to focus on social media. So now I'm going to talk about the age groups. So 48% of the people who use social media to get their news are 18 to 29-year-olds. So this is young adults and teens. And then 30 to 49-year-olds make up 40%, 50 to 64 make up 9%, and 65 and plus make up only 3% of these users. So some problems with using social media as your news source are going to be the influence of the political beliefs and your scientific beliefs. So unreliable information is a major issue on social media just because nothing really can be fact-checked. The private companies have tried to do this, but it's so hard because of all the users. So if you're seeing something on social media that is unreliable, then this can cause you to believe something politically incorrect. And then you have the influence from your social media feed, because this can lead to confirmation bias. And there's also problems with the scientific beliefs. Like I said, with the unreliable information, misinformation can be spread about scientific beliefs, and this can contradict some doctors' opinions, and this is a public health issue. So first off, what is fake news? According to Kai Shu, fake news is news with intentionally false information. It's more prevalent on social media, so this can be Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, TikTok, or Facebook. And some causes of this are going to be the accessibility to the news sources you have, the education systems around you, and the income levels. So another issue is the uninformed population. The knowledge of current events among social media users, asking about the 2020 election and if they were paying to it very closely, was only 8% of social media users said they were, and compared to 37% of the cable news watchers, 33% of the print users, and 26% of the network TV watchers. Another example was 50% of network TV users followed the coronavirus very closely, compared with only 23% of social media users. So here's some more examples. In the first one, I have a question about a group of people from a Pew Research study. They asked a group of people on different types of news sources if they could identify Dr. Fauci as an infectious disease expert. Only 52% of social media users could do this, compared with 84% of people who use news websites to get their current events or news apps. Another example was in the fall of 2020, another group of people were asked to identify who was in control of the Senate at the time. Only about half of social media users could do this, compared with about 2/3 or more in most other groups, so 73% of news websites and 67% of the cable TV watchers. And an example of misinformation that was being spread, Pew Research studies said if you use social media as a news source, you are more likely than other US adults to say that the COVID-19 virus was developed intentionally in a laboratory, and you are less likely than most other groups to say that the virus had come about naturally. So now I'm going to talk about the demographics of the people who are using social media as a news source. So in the education category, 36% of the people had a high school education or less, but this makes sense just because of a lot of people were young adults and teens. 37% had some college, and 26% had college plus. So the income levels, a third of the people had an income level of $30,000 or less, which is actually below the federal poverty line. 25% of the people made $75,000 or more. And then the age groups, like I said, it was mainly young adults and teens, but this is a whole nother issue in itself because 7 in 10 teens believe the same thing as their parents. So the engagement with politics among teens. Teens feel like they cannot relate to the media and the news and the current events, so they are so focused on their social life, which is why they're using social media just in the first place. And so if you're scrolling through social media, you say something about news, you like it, and now you have the confirmation bias, and so it can just lead to a lot of information that you were not even meant to have. So the solution to fix this problem is going to be education. So it will start with current events classes, which would be implemented from kindergarten all the way to your senior year of high school, and hopefully after that you will have built a habit. But this goes to the information by grade levels, so a kindergartner is going to have a lot different information than a senior in high school of what news they are consuming. And also, this is not just an at-school issue, it's an at-home issue, so the emphasis will have to be to parents and teachers. So some negatives from the solution are obviously going to be conflict within the classroom just because of the polarized political climate we live in. And then the prevalence of fake news, because fake news is not going to go away. So how do you fix these issues? You have to teach how to determine credible news sources. So you will learn to decipher what is reliable and what is unreliable. And then you have to learn how to disagree politely. And if people can learn how to do that, then this can create global change. So some benefits are going to be an improved critical thinking skills if you're having to decipher between what is reliable and what is not reliable. And then there will also be an improved literacy among all the students. So someone named Pescatore, she did a study on a group of people, and she implemented current events classes in her education systems. So she found that there was an increase in the overall test scores, not only in like your English or social studies classes, but it was your math classes and your science classes all had an increase on their like exit exams is what they were called. She said that using current events for the lessons can spark students' interest, develop critical thinkers, and provide students with the tools to be successful on their exit exams. So using social media to create change. Social media can be used to create change, but you have to learn how to first consume reliable information, develop skills to decipher all the information. So some examples of the social media being used to create change was Former President Trump had a rally that was being held in Tulsa, Oklahoma, and a group of TikTok users had registered and signed up for his rally. And his political campaign actually bought out a large venue, and not a lot of those people showed up. And this was all over national news and global news. And also just the 2020 election. So the importance of the election was being spread all throughout social media. And this actually led to like the largest voter turnout. And it was the largest voter turnout, especially among young people who mainly are using social media. So, and then the Black Lives Matter movement, so awareness was being spread throughout social media of what was happening to this community and everything that was going on. And so, social media it can be used to create shame, but everyone just has to learn how to use it first. So I want to say thank you, and here's my work assignment.
So good morning, everyone. My name is Reagan Chambers, for those of you who do not know me, and today I'll be presenting on the question, plastic or planet. Now, before I begin, I would like to mention that many of you may find the topic of plastic redundant as it is very present in our media today. However, the actuality of the situation has not been expressed, and today I would like to shine light on that, but as well encourage you all to become more conscious of your daily waste management. For my research, I wanted to start and figure out where our largely plastic waste culture began. And to my surprise, plastic was initially invented for the windshields of locomotives during the war, such as warplanes. And when its purpose was no longer needed following the end of World War II, manufacturers began to experiment with the material, and thus was created baggies. It was comparable to Ziplocs today, and it became adopted into households across America. As it became more popular and integrated into society at a very large scale, in this graph you can see how it became largely wasted over time as it began to cover a lot of areas across our nation in landfills. And you can see once it was introduced in society, landfills began to grow at an extremely fast growth rate across America, which is very disturbing. So still, just exactly how much plastic do we waste? Well, approximately 270 million tons is manufactured per year, but 275 million is wasted per year. The number does indeed exceed a yearly manufacturing rate as it backflows from previous years. But this number may be kind of hard to understand. So I have a size and distance comparison for you guys to get a better image of just how much plastic this is. So 254 million tons equates to approximately 60.9 billion feet cubed, which may also be kind of hard to comprehend, but imagine this. It's from the Earth and Moon and back 25 times. That's light year distance right there. That's very disturbing, and that's also much smaller than what we actually waste per year. So here in these images, you can see how plastic is in every ecosystem of the earth. You can see we have a rainforest, a jungle, a local forest where animals consume and are suffocated from the inside out from these plastics. The most disturbing of which I would have to say is a mama bird actually feeding her baby bird plastics, which will then suffocate it from the inside out, like I said before. But I'd also like to point out at the bottom there, you can see an image of microplastics. Solids are actually more harmful once they decompose and take on this form of a colorful pebble, and we then consume it unknowingly when it leads to a lot of health risk. So those of you who may not be animal lovers, why should you care? Well, it also affects us at a very large scale. Every system of our body is affected by every life cycle of plastic. We are affected in its manufacturing cycle, its refinement cycle, its consumer cycle, and its waste cycle. And it's not only by just inhalation or ingestion, but also skin contact. And it affects our nervous system, our cardiovascular system, our lymphatic, our endocrine, and reproduction system. But not only that, the chemical level of plastic is also very disturbing, as 40% contain pesticides such as DDT, which are highly carcinogenic. 50% contain PCBs, which has been banned since 1979 in the United States for its neurotoxic effects. And 80% contain PAHs, which are also highly carcinogenic. But plastics also have phthalates and high BPAs, which are also highly carcinogenic and lead to a higher risk of diabetes. But humans are not also directly affected by plastic, but indirectly affected, as the ocean life and marine life in general is largely affected by plastic. But the plastic doesn't only serve as a suffocating device for the marine life, but it's also a mini flotation device for foreign bacteria in the ocean, which is able to kill off an entire ecosystem. The fishing industry also is very responsible for the most polluted item in the ocean, fishing nets, which targets our two most important species in the ocean, our dolphins and our whales. But going back to why humans are affected by marine life is because the marine life is responsible for climate regulation in our ecosystems, as it takes heat from both poles of our Earth, as it covers 70% of the Earth's surface. But not only that, but it produces 50% of our oxygen and absorbs 50 times more carbon dioxide than our atmosphere. And this the damage that we have in our in our oceans per year equates to approximately $13 billion, which is also affecting us in our pockets, which is something America seems to care about the most. But going back to the effects of whales and dolphins, they're responsible for 85% of the 50% of oxygen created in our oceans. And when they are being killed off at a large rate, the equilibrium of the ocean will be very disrupted, as they are the top fish in the ocean. And once they disappear, so will the other species, in a domino effect of the food chain, and we'll be left with just the molecular life in our oceans. So following my research, where I would like to see change in web, where I see the most plastic is in our cafeteria, and I know that it was in efforts to try and minimize the amount of germs in our cafeteria, but I actually found that the salad containers we use in the cafeteria can be replaced by cardboard containers, and you can see in the top two images below that it's actually less expensive, and it's really accessible to replace this. But I also think the wrapped fruits in the cafeteria is really unnecessary. I don't see the reasoning behind that. But I think it would also be great if we did gardening and composting behind the cafeteria, because it can help regulate oxygen and also provide fresh vegetables with a pestless fertilizer for the vegetables. But also, web unconsciously promotes the plastic culture by selling plastic goods such as plastic water bottles. And if we no longer sell those, it would be a great way to try and become more of a green campus. But looking at a more personal and global level, at a personal level, recycling would be the last route, in my opinion, because of the 78 million tons that are recycled per year, a mere 14% is actually recycled. And so I think the best way would be to educate yourself and replace items where it's necessary. We have plastic everywhere and we don't even realize it. It's in our cars, our toothpaste, our deodorant, almost everything you can think of is packaged in plastic. And if you actually look around in your household, it'll kind of be mind-blowing just how much plastic we use at a day-to-day basis. At a global scale, I think people will be most motivated if it hits them where they care the most, in their pocket. So I think by creating acts, laws, and taxes that make plastic less desirable for companies will be the most effective route. But also creating organizations that make efforts in cleaning our environment. For example, Indonesia sets aside $1 billion per year to clean up their ecosystems, and not only the oceans. So as a last statement, I would like to say that less plastic equals more life. We are using plastic and wasting it at such an abundant scale that it's coming to the question of whether we want to continue using plastic or continue having a planet and life as we know it, as it is destroying every ecosystem in our world. So here are my resources, and thank you. And we're saying
place. We're in the middle of Bell Buckle. We're virtually no harm. We have 300 students. So what's the safety issues? Well, sadly, we don't live in a utopian society. And that web can never protect us from the real world. There will always be a real world out there that no matter, we're all web, ladies and gentlemen, we all take care of each other. But there's also other people out there that we cannot always protect from. And web needs to bring the best security it can for its students, because we promise this is the character of home, and we need to make more students want to come here and want to live at web. And so I think the main three things that web struggles with in safety is lack of safety on web campus, lack of safety on Web Road or Main Road over there, that's right by Chapel, and in terms of mental health and how we can stay emotionally safety as well. So first is the campus safety problems. So what safety issues are present on campus? I'm sure we've all been here quite a bit of time, even though that's 1 year, you've made it through a whole year. you've experienced some sort of safety problem right here. Whether it be doors not being properly locked, something of yours going missing, or even like a stranger on campus, something like that. So, web safety is not the best it can be. It's pretty good right now, but I think that, like all things, there's something that we can do to help increase this. And the best example of this is in 2018, 3 men were able to enter Rand dorm in the middle of the night, all throughout the night. And because of that, key locks were put at the doors, and that this was made a little bit harder to get into web. But despite web's best attempts to become safe, we are not the safest we can possibly be. My next point is web road. So every student has to cross web road. Raise your hand if you don't cross web road in a day. Exactly. So you have to go over there and you have to cross back. And doing that, you have to look both ways on the road and see if there are cars coming. In the past, we have had problems with cars speeding. And that's actually what made me want to do this project, is because I wanted to go into depth of researching web road and the safety of it, because the day before we had to pick our projects, I almost got hit by a car. And while I've been here, I've almost been hit by a motorcycle and a car, which isn't a really good ratio in 4 years, I don't think. I don't think a lot of high school students have that problem. So I think that not taking the road is an option. So because of that, we need to make it safer for our students to take. And then my last and most important issue is mental health problems. And this is the most difficult for web to fight because it's individualized for each person, and there's no true way or true solution to fight this. And web tries to help this, and they've done a really good job this year, I think, through mental health days and providing good guidance counselors and giving weekly check-ins and advisory, but nothing we can do will ever be enough to fight something as important as this. So what's the solution? I mean, all I've done up here is I've stood in front of you, I've complained. So there has to be a solution. But what if I told you there is a solution? And it's just one simple change that web can make that could change all these, or not resolve, but help aid us in moving forward and helping us solve these problems. Well, there is one. That's a school resource officer. So what is an SRO? Well, an SRO, or a school resource officer, are put in place to protect and serve schools on their campus. And the NASRO, which is the National Association of School Resource Officers, says that around 14,000 and 20,000 are currently deployed around the country. So you can see other schools are using this as well to help protect their schools and their students. And not only is this like an officer, but it's also a school resource officer also acts as a teacher, guidance counselor, and mentor to the students that protects. So why was there a need for SROs? Like, why are SROs around? So in the 1950s, SROs were present, but they weren't really widespread. They were used in some schools, but not all. Mostly in urban areas, like inner city schools and stuff like that, just to help keep a police officer on campus at all times. But in the mid-1990s, problems got really bad in schools. As you can see on the screen, there was a big percentage of juvenile crimes in the 1990s, and the schools needed a way to combat this. And so their solution was making SROs widespread and having these officers protect their students, not only from other students, but from outside sources as well. And though I'm not saying all web has any of these problems, because we don't at all. Our problems are very, very minimal. But it just goes to show how schools were using SROs to attack their problems, using them as solutions to help increase their safety and bettering the lives of the students. And in the 2000s, or early 2000s, all these problems basically went away or were minimized. So, we've seen that SROs can help other schools, but how can they help web? How can they help our campus become the best it can possibly be? Well, first off is campus safety. So, SROs are trained the same way local police force officers are trained. They're given the same sort of kind of initiation, and they go through the same training that a, let's say, Shelbyville cop would go through. But they also have something on top of that, which is SRO training. So they're getting basically more training than an inner city cop would have to be an SRO and to be around these students at all times. And then the biggest thing about SROs is that they're always available on campus. If we had a full-time SRO on campus, they would always be available to us. And then no matter the situation, and let's just say in the horrible situation where we had a school shooting, it would take the local police statistically around America 12.5 minutes to react, which in that time in a dire situation is way too long for any sort of kind of adjustment or kind of reaction to the situation to take place. But if we had an SRO on campus, they could react immediately and they would also be familiar with the campus as well. So they would know what time we're going to lunch and where the students are, what the buildings are, where the most dangerous areas on campus are for a school shooter to be, and stuff like that. So that's why it's most important for a SRO to be on campus, just because of the availability of it on campus already. And then on road safety. So an SRO can actually greatly increase the safety on the road, which I know is surprising because, I mean, their job is to protect and serve. So how can they help the road? Well, an SRO, as you can see, if you go through Shelbyville, you can see SROs acting as crossing guards or traffic directors for different schools. And if we had a traffic director or an SRO acting as a traffic director between classes, I think that our road safety would greatly increase, because then the cars would see someone out there for them to direct traffic, and then it wouldn't just be like a middle schooler looking both ways and crossing the road as a car is going 30 down the road and can't stop in time. So if we had an SRO on campus just to direct the traffic and say stop and then go to the students, this would be a much more easy and feasible option than having something like a stoplight with a pedestrian crossing, which is what I originally looked at before I chose SROs to do my project, or speed bumps, which wouldn't be that feasible. Or an SRO would be a cheaper option because they're doing this on the side as well. And then not only can an SRO physically help traffic, but also they can relay information. So I used to go to Liberty School in Shelbyville, and at there we had PTO meetings. And PTO meetings, the SRO would talk. And each time we talk about something different. But most of the time it was about driving safety around the school and how parents should pick up their children safely and how they can properly act to go through the car lane to pick up their children, not speed, stuff like that. If we just had some sort of information relayed to our parents or even the students of what the speed limits are and how to drive safely around campus, I think that people would slow down a little bit. I don't think it would help tremendously because there's still public people out here. But that's what the crossing guards for. But any little thing that we can do will help. And then the last, and in my opinion, the most important thing is emotional safety. And that is because since dire emergencies, like an SRO having to stop a school shooting or an SRO having to stop a car from hitting a child is pretty rare at most places or in most schools, and will only happen once a year in a state or something like that. I think that an SRO's most important job is to act as a guidance counselor and mentor to students. And because SROs are trained in SRO training, they learn how to communicate programs such as DARE. And DARE helps with drug, sexual, and emotional health awareness. So just having a program like this, like we have Rodney Poole, who comes here to help communicate these problems with us. But if we had an SRO here all the time, we wouldn't need someone to come once a year like Rodney Poole, because we would have someone who could relay this information to us all the time, whether it be in chapel or advisory or something like that. What they're trained to do is they're trained to kind of talk to us about our problems and trained to talk to us about the consequences and the kind of repercussions that come with taking drugs or something like that. And also, SROs give students a figure to turn to while away from home. At Webb, we have a pretty big boarding population. And having this SRO, which is our protector, will give the students a kind of paternal figure to turn to, because it is their protector, and it is someone they can look up to, and it is someone that's protecting them, it is someone that is for them, and is there to protect them. And so having that, Roszak displays in a study on SROs that he conducted, that SROs are known to have positive effects and relationships on the students at their selected schools. So having SRO isn't, some people believe that SROs are a prison pipeline for students, and having them in schools makes the student's chance of going to prison and having a horrible life much higher. But there is no correlation between SROs and arrest. Actually, SROs on campus have a higher chance of having students that don't go to jail because they have programs such as DARE and have this kind of communication with them. And then at Liberty, we also had a very, very strong relationship with our SRO. Not only was he our protector, not only was he kind of in place for us, but he was also our biggest fan at games, and he would stand in the student section, kind of get us riled up, stuff like that. So he was a part of us as like of our family. So, like everything good in life, it comes with a price. And though this number looks really, really big, this is really no different than hiring a faculty member. The average school teacher makes $22,000 to $55,000 a year, so this basically falls in that category, and that would be similar to hiring another teacher, but seeing that all the benefits an SRO brings, like being a teacher and by being a protector, I feel like this is a pretty small price to pay, and also an SRO makes the school more appealing to protect our prospective students and parents coming to tour the school, because they see our maximized security, our effort, and our kind of ways of dealing with our safety and the ways that we are coping with being such a small school, but also having the best security we possibly can. So after looking at it, it's kind of hard to refute the web needs an SRO as soon as possible. And from all the benefits it brings to have an SRO on campus, there's virtually no need not to have one. And from whether that be safety on campus, safety on the road, our safety for us feeling safe and our emotional support and our information that's given to us, there's really no need that we don't need an SRO. So this is just something to rest on, and thank you all for listening. Thank you.
Mark, since you're up there, I'll just ask the question that I have. We'll start.
All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Chandler Vargas. This is my 4th and final year here at Webb. And for my senior project, I researched the duality, security and privacy in the classroom, and the relevancy of COVID-19. So schools across America today are under assault from a variety of problems, the most poignant and publicized of which being school shootings. Rampant bullying continues to be a problem across our country, and most recently, COVID-19 is a threat to our health and safety. The most obvious solution to all of these problems is technological surveillance. Unfortunately, things like metal detectors and security cameras can strike fear in students, according to researchers in urban and rural environments across the country. In addition, metal detectors and security cameras can create a technological fortress, creating an environment that's non-conducive for learning. As far as implementing technology in the classroom goes, there is significant precedent in the courts. And John Jay Technological Institute in San Antonio, Texas, one parent sued the school for making their daughter carry an RFID tag, which is a form of tracking identification, claiming that it violated her rights. The court ruled in favor of the school, saying that the parents should ask for an exemption. Furthermore, at Hermitage High in Virginia, one student sued the school for confiscating their phone and searching it for evidence of use of marijuana. They argued that the school had violated their Fourth Amendment rights to a search warrant, but the court ruled that the school was actually in their jurisdiction by searching through their phone. So it's evident that schools can trump these constitutional and religious rights, but the question is, should they? And to answer that question, we can look at government's response to COVID-19 throughout the globe. The first country I looked at was China. At the initial outbreak, the epicenter at Wuhan, the government used smartphone GPS technology to track 3,000 citizens who were initially exposed to the virus. They continue to use smartphone technology to enforce quarantines and to track transmission throughout their country, and they continue to do this today. In the West, there is more of a sacred right to privacy that governments have to abide by. With that being said, some states have made cautious attempts at tracking by launching their own cell phone apps, but these apps are not mandatory. Objectively, this method of surveillance is less effective than the Chinese model. And in addition to this, there's been a powerful counter movement that has sought to shoot down these sorts of tracking. If people don't want to wear a mask or take vaccines, why would they want the government watching them and tracking their transmission? With all that being said, there exists a close to perfect medium in Singapore. The government has handed out Bluetooth tokens which can pair with their phones. The reason why this is preferable to GPS technology is because it relies on proximity rather than exact location. When one Bluetooth token gets within a certain radius of the other one, it can detect who's near, and if one person has been exposed, it will notify the other person's cellular device. The reason this is close to perfect is because the Singaporean government plans on mandating this technology throughout their country. Obviously, that wouldn't work in a country like the United States, where everyone values their personal rights. The RFID technology is an excellent alternative and similar to the Bluetooth tokens that are used in Singapore for tracking people not only across the country, but in school systems. This is the same technology that you have in your credit card. It involves a tag and a reader. When they get into a certain proximity, the data in the tag is transferred to the reader. The range is determined for the RFID tag upon manufacturing. And like I said, this is very similar to the Bluetooth token technology I mentioned in Singapore, and is less invasive than, say, exact tracking location from GPS. At the Webb School, boarders are very familiar with this. We have NFC chips across the buildings on campus, so we can update our dorm parents about our exact location to sign in and sign out. The difference between NFC and RFID is that NFC is a predetermined range. It's about 4 inches, and it's very minimalistic, so it's very difficult to remember to sign in. Whereas with an RFID technology, you could have a reader span a door frame, have a student carrying an RFID tag, and when they walk through the door frame, it would automatically sign them in without them having to remember a thing. They both come in at around the same price point, so there really isn't a difference when it comes to cost. They're very cheap. Another addition that I think Webb should make to their security system is a more comprehensive video surveillance ecosystem. When creating a video camera ecosystem, it's very important that it is backwards compatible, meaning that you can implement older and newer cameras into a pre-existing ecosystem. Some countries and schools have implemented AI cameras. For example, in some supermarkets in China, a camera will scan customers' faces, detect whether or not they're wearing a face mask, and if they aren't, direct them through a megaphone to put on a mask. In other schools, and schools across the country in America, there are AI cameras that can detect potential behaviors of a school shooter or even detect acts of bullying. Of course, these cameras are more invasive, so it's up to the individual institution on whether or not they want to implement them. When we use video surveillance and RFID in conjunction, it really creates a perfect ecosystem that gives students room to breathe. Rather than having constant surveillance, you could have a video camera that's triggered when an RFID tag is read, or you can have it so it's constantly recording, and say a teacher thinks that a student has done something wrong, they can detect their location using the RFID tag and reader logs, and then go back to that time on the security camera, serving as an alert system. And like I said, this is less invasive. The final piece of technology that I believe needs to be implemented at Webb is a direct multi-channel communication system. Currently at Webb, we have a text alert system. So in the case of a tornado warning, school shooting, or even to let us know that it's a late day the next day, they'll send out a text to everyone. The issue with this system is that it's a one-way channel, meaning that in the event of an emergency such as a school shooting, teachers and students would be overwhelming administration. And it's not really an effective way to communicate back and forth. So an excellent alternative to this would be an app like GroupMe, Schoology, or WhatsApp, where you can communicate back and forth with one another. And so in conclusion, there's still going to be residual concerns in any community when we're implementing new surveillance technology. The only way that we can really alleviate said concerns is through transparency. That's letting people know why we're implementing this technology and how it's going to benefit their health and safety. We can use the technology from countries across the globe that have been combating COVID-19 and implement them here at Webb on a microcosmic scale. Like I said, the RFID technology is very similar to the Bluetooth technology that's being used in Singapore. And this system is very cheap and it's also effective. So I believe it's the perfect fit for here at Webb. I truly believe that the system that I have found is a perfect fit here. All right, here's my bibliography and I'm taking questions. So Cedric.
If the RFID is so much better, why do you think Webb is using NFC?
When it comes to smartphones, most smartphones today have NFC already pre-installed, like an NFC reader or tag in their phone. So if we were to switch to RFID technology, we would have to have students carrying some form of identification badge with that built in. Like for example, the vending machine in the student center has an NFC reader built in, so you can pay with your phone. So everyone has access to an NFC reader already in their phone. It's just a question of whether or not the school is willing to make the investment to distribute identification tags with RFID. Well, smartphone's more expensive than an identification thing. I mean, I know students like even in Meadows who don't have access to a phone with an NFC chip. So this would be an easy way to keep everyone on the same playing field. More questions? Mr. Quinn.
I saw a program where the AI technology is being utilized to identify individuals, especially in China, like on the street and things like that. So you can tell where everyone is at a certain amount of time. Is it troubling at all that governments are gearing toward keeping track of everyone at any particular time in the world?
I guess that comes down to your individual political beliefs. Personally, as far as we're talking about AI cameras, that gives me flashbacks to 1984. It's really up to your individual political beliefs. I really don't see a problem with it, especially if you have trust in the government. That's the most important aspect of this whole situation is trust. So if you believe that your government has your best interest in mind, then I don't see why you would have a problem with them tracking your location. Yes, in the back.
Speaking of the government having the best interest in mind, the school's government, the board of trustees, do you really think they go for this? Like, I understand you've done research and it's a great idea, but how can we appeal this to them?
I think the main selling point here is that it's cheap and effective. So you're adding an extra safety net when you're talking about direct communication, when you're talking about video camera surveillance and RFID technology. That's 3 pieces of technology that are all integrated with one another that can help protect the school. And it comes at very little cost to the school. Also, you could potentially cut out your connection with the boardingware company, which I think would probably save money with the school. I think it's expensive to have that implemented. I don't know the exact cost, but I'm sure it costs something. So I don't see any reason why they wouldn't be okay with implementing this. Aubrey.
Have you gauged potential student and parent pushback and just really thought about how this sort of kind of surveillance and security system would influence our perception of this character fault vibe we're going for?
Yeah, definitely. That's what I was talking about with the technological fortress and why I mentioned granting exemptions to people who needed them and being transparent. We're in Tennessee. This is a very conservative area, and I would predict there to be a lot of pushback to a system such as this. But then again, if we communicate why this is in our best interests, why this is safeguarding our health, and why it's best for the welfare of our community, I think that we can try and minimize that pushback.
Are there models that you found that you have this tripartite structure? Are there any schools that you mentioned in public specific programs at school already or something like that?
Yep.
Is there a school that use all 3 doesn't it work?
I mentioned before John Jay Technological Institute in San Antonio, Texas. They have been using RFID technologies in conjunction with their video camera system. Again, like Aubrey mentioned, there was a lot of pushback with that, especially since that's in a predominantly conservative environment. But I know of schools that have been using direct communication applications that link parents, students, administrators, and teachers all together. But I can't name an institution that's doing all 3 at once. But I truly believe that if we were to implement that here, that the effect of that would be beneficial to our safety. Oh, okay.
Do you think that implementing a system like this could lead to a sort of surveillance creep where you have this, and like I said, it's finished for our safety, and something else happens to breach that system, so we more and more and more and more, and eventually we end up in a 1984 incident that's like fully the problem.
I definitely see where you're coming from there. Again, like I said before, it all really comes down to trust in your individual institution. And part of that comes down to balancing reactionary responses versus preventive responses. Again, there's it definitely it's not an easy thing to implement into a community and to make the community feel safe. Any form of surveillance isn't natural. It doesn't feel like something that we should be doing, but it is keeping our health and safety in mind. So,
I'll end with this, but one of the things is that we've been surveilling each other for thousands. We put up guard towers. We look out for our enemies and such. But the thing that troubles me in your presentation here and what you're saying is that this system is based upon our trust in the government, our trust in administration. And that's totally opposite from the perspective of the government no longer trusting its citizenry, the administration no longer trusting the students, or the invaders of the property that aren't necessarily of the web community. And I wonder if we place as much emphasis on trying to discover what it is about our humanity that makes this distrust so prevalent, and try to resolve those issues, if this would make this surveillance less necessary. That's really difficult.
Yeah, that's very hard to implement. Of course, I would love it if everyone could just not commit school shootings and not bully people and wear their mask all the time and abide by school rules. But we live in a reality where that's objectively not possible. So it's unfortunate that we have to implement technology such as this, but it is really at this point our only option. Okay.
Do you think there's a balance? Like, what balance would be in your mind the ideal balance between a certain amount of danger that's worth having in the back of our mind, as opposed to security? Or like, what is the amount of danger that you think is okay to have to not have officer surveillance?
Yeah, so that question kind of engenders memories of the Patriot Act following 9/11 and the response that the citizenry had to that Patriot Act, which, for those who don't know, was the direct surveillance of the citizens following 9/11 to help prevent acts of terrorism. And there were lots of counter protests to that. Again, the biggest issue with that Patriot Act and the biggest issue that I would seek to avoid with the security system is transparency. Letting people know that you're surveilling them is one of the easiest ways to alleviate concern. When people find out that they're being surveyed without their knowledge, it's very shocking, and it often causes anger and distress and distrust in whatever institution is surveying you. So as far as balance goes, again, it comes down to the individual person asking for exemptions. Yeah.